As video games are such a young medium, they have a lot to prove when it comes to showing that they're more than just a brainless way to kill time. Of course, as we all know, games can be thought-provoking, mind-bending, and clever enough to leave your brain in a knot before you untangle that and come out the other side enlightened and recommending what you just played to anyone who'll listen. In the past, cerebrally perplexing games have tended to hang out in the background of the games industry, a bit like the brainiest kid in class who was forever too shy and nervous to ever be counted. Sad simile, I know, but look, don't worry. This figurative brainy kid is doing very well. Hell, forget figurative, there's a whole bunch of us working for this channel right now. Mentally stimulating games have come to the fore of the industry since it was discovered that players aren't just mindless zombies, but instead sentient beings who love a good intellectual, psychological, and logical challenge. Like literally anyone trying to beat me on Crash Team Racing. Seriously, there's no joke here whatsoever. If we ever get streams off the ground, bring it on, all of you. Anyway, with all the rest of that in mind, I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 genius video games that will mess with your mind. Number 10, Antichain. Nothing works as you expect in the beautifully minimal puzzle maze that is Antichain. Starting off in a big black antechamber with a wall showing you a cryptic map that reveals each location as you visit it, a 90-minute countdown timer starts ticking away as you head into the maze. Each puzzle is prefaced with a drawing and a simple sentence encouraging you to get into the right mindset for what you're attempting to solve, but that only makes them mildly less cryptic. There's almost no repetition or pattern from one puzzle to the next, and many force you to rethink what you know about 3D space itself. New rooms get revealed simply by looking at one object from another perspective, whilst others can appear by walking in a different direction. You'll spend hours totally stumped by Antichamber, all the while being mesmerized by its awesome aesthetic, alongside the fact that anyone could even conceptualize this stuff in the first place. Number 9, the Stanley Parable. How much autonomy do we really have when playing a game? Say you play a linear story with a narrator, what would you do if you could defy that narrator? And if you did, are you really liberating yourself from the story, or is that the story overall? Netflix's Bandersnatch played with this idea very well, but back in 2013, the Stanley Parable did it one better. Best described as a metagame commenting on the nature of gaming itself, the Stanley Parable entails you wandering around a deserted office as Stanley himself, listening to an omniscient narrator who tells you which way to go at each juncture, but then deciding for yourself whether or not you want to go that way or not. There are countless endings which range from the mundane to charming, strange to twisted to surreal, or just forcing Stanley to stand in a cupboard forever as the narrator gets increasingly annoyed. Like BioShock forcing us to reconcile the very notion of purpose within video games, here there are no right or wrong choices, only the ones that you make and have to live with. Number 8, BioShock Infinite. Speaking of BioShock, Infinite is a masterclass of video game storytelling, showcasing gaming's ability to tell powerful stories about human history, politics, and unthinkable astrophysics theories. Set in a skybound version of prosperous America at the turn of the 20th century, Infinite combines a commentary about the country's relationships with religion and just how bloody highly it thinks of itself with a time-traveling story based on multiverse theory. This is the idea that infinite universes exist. I mean, hell, there'd be one where Jules has a luscious head of hair and tells dad jokes, and every possible combination of things that can happen is happening right now across all of time. Somewhere in there is Rich actually playing the games we need to talk about for Game of the Year, but let's not get too crazy. As you follow the godly powerful Elizabeth, who you're supposed to be saving, through tears in the space-time continuum, it's easy to lose track of just which of the game's many universes you're in at any given moment. What are the constants? What are the variables? And just what the hell do the Lutece twins mean with their various synchronized conversations? It all comes together beautifully in the Sea of Doors scene at the end, as you travel through various junctures in Booker's life, leading to an ending that poignantly loops right back around to the beginning before it all started, just so that one specific timeline can be altered as everything else happens all over again. At least, I think that's what happened. Number 7, Spec Ops The Line. Spec Ops starts off just like any number of modern or near-future war shooters. Such is the genius of its subversion. Writer Walt Williams needed this to appear as generic as hell so he could take you on one hell of a ride immediately after. Power through those early stages and you start to see there's more at work. The deeper you go, the more the story starts resembling something like Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness. And as you're forced into disturbingly plausible military situations that leave you with no choice but to do what you already identify as the wrong thing, protagonist Martin Walker's mental state gradually deteriorates. The further the game goes, the more delirious and hallucinatory things become, causing you to feel confused about your entire role in the mission from the start. It's all set up to make one hell of a comment on both the overall horrors of war and their effect on a soldier's psyche. Spec Ops The Line is a personal favorite, and if you're yet to play through this particular hidden gem, please add that to your life's to-do list. Number 6, This War of Mine. We've all played as 1,000,001 hoorah soldiers storming the front lines, but what about the civilian side of any conflict? The human toll cast to the wayside as we detonate bombs in all directions and spray gunfire through the streets. In this war of mine, you're just an everyday person stranded in a bombed-out location, needing to keep yourself and your family alive by any means necessary. How far you'll go and how desensitized you'll become is where this really starts to take hold. It confronts you with the kind of moral dilemmas rarely explored in games. If your family is hungry, are you prepared to steal some food from a frail elderly couple to feed them? Will you approach strangers as people also looking to survive, or as potential adversaries who need to be killed for your own safety? Doing the latter takes its toll on your playable characters, as again, they're not super soldiers. Asking people to butcher and kill out of nowhere can result in characters deciding that their own lives aren't worth living, and suicide is one of the many ways you can see credits. Number 5, BioShock. We can't talk about games messing with your mind and not talk about BioShock. A final twist so genius and so tied to BioShock as a video game rather than a book or a film, it's one of the medium's all-time best and most essential. The infamous revelation that all along you've been a puppet for the ruthlessly revolutionary Frank Fontaine, robotically following orders to the trigger phrase of "would you kindly," is a total subversion of your typical first-person shooter power fantasy. Yes, you'd acquired all kinds of superpowers and become more lethal than the already formidable Big Daddies, but all of that was so you could unwittingly assassinate your own father. And it was played through the fact that pre-2007, no one playing any video game ever doubted a tutorial or a helper side character. By factoring Atlas's "would you kindly do X or Y" instructions into us being brainwashed as both players and Jack himself, it frazzled everyone's minds in a way that even BioShock itself has never topped. Number 4, Braid. As I'll get to, Jonathan Blow is a genius, but his first game featured an unassuming little chap called Tim trying to track down a princess across some neatly hand-drawn 2D platforming levels. The twist is time, as Braid is much more a puzzler, relying on wielding time itself to defeat enemies, find keys, and progress. Each world makes you reassess the rules of time in a different way, whether it's by only moving when you do, or by using your shadow from a previous run to help solve the situation at hand. Just on a purely conceptual level, to even think of the scenarios Blow and his team came up with kinda breaks my mind. And that's before I try to unpack theories of relativity or freaking time itself. Oh, and the entire premise of saving the princess, even that isn't remotely what it seems. To unlock the full picture, you'll have to complete the hardest sequences in the game that it feels as though only a fraction of the populace could even comprehend. If you were one of those people, celebrate down in the comments because hats off. Number 3, Fez. Say what you will about the now retired Phil Fish, but there was always a method behind the madness. It takes a pretty high level of intellect to create a puzzle platformer of Fez's complexity, which appears to be a 2D game at first, but soon reveals itself to be 3D thanks to a nifty rotating camera trick that gave it a perspective we'd never seen in games before. Beneath its charming pixel looks, Fez is actually one of the toughest puzzlers out there and is best played with a pen and paper, so you can scribble down symbols, map out locations to return to later, and try to decode the strange language of the game itself. Because yes, Fez has its own language. A veritable Indiana Jones-style tomb of Easter eggs, secrets, and moments of ingenuity, only the sharpest, most obsessive minds will ever get to see all that Fez has to offer. Unless you go searching on YouTube. Oh, and while we're on, why have more games outside of Arc System Works' Guilty Gear and Dragon Ball FighterZ or Octopath Traveler not done more 2D meets 3D? It's the coolest thing on the planet. Number 2, Eternal Darkness. Eternal Darkness might be the most overlooked horror of all time, and that's probably because it's on the most overlooked console of all time, the Nintendo GameCube. With a story about pre-human deities, the game has strong overtones of Lovecraftian horror. You play a woman called Alexandra wandering around a mansion investigating the death of your father, but gameplay jumps between several different characters and time periods, dating as far back as Roman times. The real-man games of Eternal Darkness come through its depiction of Alexandra's deteriorating sanity, which effectively reach out of the screen and make you feel like you're going insane by deleting your save files, turning the volume down on your TV, or even resetting the console. As someone who accidentally deleted their 100+ hour save of Red Dead Redemption 2, I can totally relate. Seriously, Rockstar, did you have to put the new save right next to the old one? God. Back to Eternal Darkness, and even paintings could become disfigured or statues would turn their heads to look at you. It harnesses the ability to be incredibly unsettling in a very pure sense, and I can't think of a single horror that's ever come close since. Number 1, The Witness. I said it before and I'll say it again. Jonathan Blow is a genius. Like some crazy otherworldly alien intellect that only occasionally blesses us with its presence level of genius. At a glance, every puzzle in The Witness is a grid, tasking you to get a dot from one place to another, but oh boy, there is so much more to it than that. Like what, you ask? Like a complete fundamental breakdown of language, communication, and the very meaning that makes life worth living. Words, shapes, symbols. The Witness starts off simple, but slowly shows you how communication platforms come to be, how languages start out, and how you can learn to read a flow of shapes and colors just like the written word. The nearest comparison I can think of is how characters in The Matrix can look at all those glyphs and see exactly what's happening in real time, but here it's applied to an entire island's worth of separate scenarios. Each zone is trying to talk to you through its own initially baffling rule set, and getting your head around that is so satisfying in a purely cerebral sense, it's kinda hard to put into words, so I just recommend you go play it. And that is my list. Let me know down in the comments which other genius video games broke your mind only to reassemble it better than ever. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, and I'll catch you soon.